Taharqa, the great Taharqa, the most powerful and greatest pharaoh of the 25th dynasty, show enough the truth. You feel me? And so we're gonna talk about him. He ruled between 690 664 BCE. He really was the one out of the 25th dynasty that went up against the Assyrians at the time when the Assyrians was trying to take over the Levant, trying to take over Egypt. And if it was not for Taharqa rising up, they would have been successful in taking over most of the Levant, most of ancient Egypt. And so he is one of the great warrior kings of all of Egypt, not just, in the 25th dynasty, but of all Egypt. Now, as I said, he was the greatest pharaoh of the 25th dynasty. He was a builder. He was a defender of ancient Egypt. He was a restorer of its ancient legacy and culture. You see, along, continuing in the line of the founder Pianki, because Pianki laid the blueprint. PA. He laid the blueprint on, establishing the old kingdom traditions, the old kingdom veneration of AMUN, you see. And so Taharqa, Shabaka, all the pharaohs of the 25th dynasty followed in the footsteps of Pianki, okay? And Taharqa was the pharaoh in Egypt's last great imperial stand. Okay, because we have to understand in the 25th dynasty, we're talking about empire. Now, this is what blows my mind, because here it is, Egypt then been fractionalized for at least 400 years or more. Some people say 450 years. It was fractionalized. It wasn't under one ruler. You see, it wasn't under one ruler. And so, Ramesses III, who was the king, the first king, I believe, of the 20th dynasty. I believe so. And he was the last pharaoh of the new kingdom. Okay, he was the last pharaoh of the new kingdom. Let me plug in. We back in the house. And so that ended Egypt's imperialistic age. It was over with Ramesses III, 1186 to 1155. And from that moment, after Ramesses III, Egypt fell into disarray. And so to be in that state for 400 years, I don't know no other intermediate period took that long. The first intermediate period, I don't believe it may have been 100 or so, 200 years. I had to look, but I don't believe no intermediate period was over 400 years. I don't believe so. And that's a long time, 400 to 450 years. And then out of nowhere, the 25th dynasty rises up and reestablishes Egypt as empire. Yeah, thank you, family. Yeah. To reestablish empire after, and establish pyramid building. This is mind blowing. And so Taharqa was a ruler of a united now empire. So Nubia, Egypt, even the Levant was under the control of the 25th dynasty. Now, Taharqa had two capitals. Okay, so under Taharqa, Napata and Karnak, the twin sacred cities of AMUN, both were the capitals of Egypt under Taharqa. Okay, so he controlled territory from Sudan to the Levant and was one of the last great pharaohs to rule Egypt as a world power. So when the 25th dynasty came into power, you see, Egypt became an empire, and it again became, one of the dominant nations on the planet. But no matter what, Egypt was always the spiritual capital. No matter what, it was always the spiritual capital of the world, even to today. Even to today, it's still the spiritual capital. You see, Taharqa was one of the great builders of the 25th dynasty, probably the greatest builder. So he expanded all kind of temples. He added on to most of the great temples of ancient Egypt. You see, so he built a kiosk, and explaining the kiosk, which is it's a temple, but it doesn't have walls. Meaning you got the columns and you got the roof, but it's open. You see, it's open so you can see, on all sides. And what happens is, ceremonies and rituals take place within the kiosk. It's almost like if you was at a wedding. You know how you have a wedding and it could be outside, and then they have a little, certain parks have a kiosk where you can have a ceremony out in the park, and it's open, and you got you got a roof over it, but you can have, where the people can come in, they can perform the wedding or whatever they want to do. That's a kiosk. And Taharqa built one of the largest kiosks out of stone in the ceremonial courtyard of the temple of Karnak. Okay, and so he also expanded on that temple, the Karnak and Luxor. And Luxor is not far down the road from Karnak. If you're not familiar, I'll do some videos on which I intend to do on all the great temples of Kemet and Nubia. Okay, and so he also built temples at Kawa and Jebel Barkal, which is in Napata, which is in the Sudan. So not only did he replenish the temples in Egypt, in Karnak, in Luxor, he even replenishes the temples in the Sudan. So Taharqa was a great benefactor of the temples, beautifying the temples. And so he revived Old Kingdom architecture and symbolism. This is very important that we understand how the 25th dynasty really was rooted in the Old Kingdom. Okay? They went back to where it all began. You see? And so that's why they began to brought forth the second golden age of pyramid building. And a lot of people don't, they try to make it seem as if the Nubians were mimicking the Egyptians. Man, they started the golden age of pyramid building in Nubia almost 1,500 years after Egypt, because you have to remember, even the Egyptians, they had went to the Valley of the Kings. They had stopped building pyramids, pretty much after the Old Kingdom. You see, so so they had been out of pyramid building in Egypt almost 1,500 years, and here come the Nubians, and they saying, we have to reconnect to the root that started it all. Okay, we have to reconnect to the root. And so uh, Taharqa built the largest pyramid, you see, at Nuri. So he founded the royal cemetery at Nuri. And his pyramid is there. If you want to look it up, it is there. And so, that's very important that we understand how Taharqa was really the one that revived the Great Pyramid age of the Nubians. And it lasted over 1,000 years. They were building pyramids into the AD period. People got to recognize that. They were all still building pyramids into the AD period, 350 years, okay? So, and the thing, he was the one that defended Africa against the Assyrians. He later had to fall back to Napata. You see, he later had to fall back to Napata. But I'm going to tell you what, the 25th dynasty did, a divine justice to Africa, by raising up and, and going and lifting Egypt up and breathing life back into Egypt for another 100 years. And so that was our last walk in the sun. Taharqa the Great. I believe you got Tantamani, who I don't know if he was the son of Taharqa, but he was the last pharaoh, and he tried to, fight off the Assyrians, but to no avail. Okay, but to no avail. And so Taharqa, the one thing that which is really magnificent, was the fact that Karnak and Napata, he unified Africa's greatest religious centers. So this must be, if you're into Nile Valley studies, you must focus in on this 25th dynasty. Look at Taharqa back there. And we had to ask the question, why are so many noses knocked off? You see? Why are so many noses knocked off of these statues? You see? Because it's a symbol of Africanness that they don't want to recognize. It hurt too much to see such great rulers looking African. You feel me? Appreciate y'all, family. Make sure y'all leave some comments. If you got some information you want to add on the 25th dynasty, Taharqa, please add it in the comments. Got any questions, please ask, and the general will respond later. I appreciate y'all. Thank you. Peace and Black Power.